Evelyn Harrington had mastered the art of control markets, mergers, boardrooms, and billion-dollar contracts all bent to her will. Yet the one thing she could not command was her own exhaustion. Somewhere between takeoff and cruising altitude, her carefully guarded world betrayed her head coming to rest on the shoulder of a complete stranger. She braced for humiliation. Instead, she was met with a quiet, unexpected kindness that slipped through her defenses like sunlight through a crack in a wall. She thought was impenetrable. The stranger, a man dressed with the simple practicality of someone who had lived through storms most people never saw, smelled faintly of laundry soap and rain, and though she didn't know it yet, his life was quietly breaking apart. 2,000 miles away, his young son was fighting for breath. In a hospital bed, Evelyn had no reason to care. She had built her empire on a foundation of cold logic and self-preservation. But 3 hours later, she would be standing at that boy's bedside, unknowingly at the edge of a choice that would alter all three of their lives forever. The airport gleamed under the amber spill of sunset. Glass walls caught the fading light, scattering it in fractured gold across the polished floors. Boarding announcements pulsed through the cavernous terminal, a chorus of urgency layered over the rhythmic staccato of Evelyn's heels. She moved like a woman, born to command attention, her designer briefcase swinging in precise harmony with her stride, her silhouette sharpened by a tailored suit worth more than most people's rent. She was 29, brilliant, ruthless when she needed to be, the architect of a tech empire conjured from nothing but ambition and sleepless nights. Yet under the immaculate polish, her body ached with fatigue that no caffeine or title could mask. The sting of yesterday's defeat still pulsed in her veins. 3 months of delicate negotiation erased in a single, curt phone call. Officially, she told herself this trip was for business, a conference in Chicago that demanded her presence. But in the quieter chambers of her mind, she knew better. She was running from suffocating boardroom scrutiny, from the press breathing down her neck, from an empty penthouse echoing with the price of her success. Love was a luxury she didn't believe in, not anymore. Relationships were risks she couldn't calculate, and Evelyn Harrington did not gamble. At the opposite end of the gate stood Nathan, out of place among the manicured suits and glossy luggage. His worn jeans carried the memory of harder days, and the canvas backpack on his shoulder bore faint crayon marks and juice stains. In his hand, he rolled a chipped red toy airplane between his fingers, a plane that had looked more imaginary miles than most private jets. Oliver, his 6-year-old son, was home with Mrs. Chan from next door. The boy's fever had broken that morning, but leaving him, even for a few hours, felt like ripping out a part of his own chest. This job interview in the city was necessary. More opportunities, better schools, a fresh start after Claire had walked out 2 years ago. But necessity did not make absence easier. His phone buzzed, a picture from Mrs. Chen. Oliver, pale but smiling faintly over a bowl of soup. Nathan's heart clenched. That familiar cocktail of love and fear coursing through him. 33 years old, and he felt decades older. Single fatherhood had a way of compressing time into a relentless grind. Their meeting was almost cinematic in its inevitability. Evelyn, scanning her phone, walked straight into Nathan, who had just pivoted toward the boarding gate. Her briefcase flew open, lipstick skittering across the floor, documents scattering like an expensive snowstorm. Nathan crouched immediately, gathering the mess with quiet efficiency, murmuring an apology without looking up. His focus already dragged back to his phone. Evelyn's irritation was instant. The least he could do was meet her eyes. She snatched the papers from his hands, stuffing them back with clipped precision, heels clicking away without another word. It should have ended there, but the universe, with its dark humor, had other plans. She reached her seat in business class and froze. There he was, the mumbling man with the toy airplane settled right beside her. Recognition flickered in his tired features, followed by the faintest ghost of amusement. Evelyn considered asking for a seat change, but the flight attendant's cheerful announcement that the plane was full left no room for escape. With a sigh that carried the weight of 100 unspoken protests, she slid into her seat, her laptop snapping open like a shield. Nathan shifted, granting her more space, before resuming his quiet, absent-minded spinning of the toy plane. The engines roared, the city of Los Angeles shrinking into a constellation of flickering lights below each one. A life, a story, a heartbeat, left behind. As the cabin lights dimmed, Evelyn buried herself in work, fingers flying across the keyboard in a last-ditch attempt to hold back the exhaustion flying at her. But sleep is a predator that always finds its prey. The turbulence was mild, but enough to tilt her slightly toward him. Her eyelids grew heavier with each blink, her laptop screen fading into an indistinct blur. And when she finally surrendered, her head found its resting place on the shoulder of a stranger whose life was about to intertwine with hers in ways neither could have imagined. The contact was feather light, at first accidental, unplanned, her golden hair spilling like liquid silk across the faded flannel. Stretched over his shoulder, Nathan froze. Every instinct screamed for him to shift away, to create that polite buffer between strangers, to preserve the invisible boundaries people cling to in the close quarters of travel. But when he turned, intending to gently wake her, something in him stilled. Beneath the flawless makeup lay faint shadows beneath her eyes, those unmistakable crescents born of too many sleepless nights and too many burdens carried in silence. Fine stress lines etched a quiet truth into her face, a truth no amount of expensive concealer could erase. And without the armor of her carefully maintained expression, she looked different, not untouchable, not intimidating, vulnerable, almost fragile. She was someone's daughter, perhaps someone's sister, and right now, she was just another human being carrying invisible weights, ones he could only guess at. Nathan's mind flickered to Oliver, his little boy curling into him during thunderstorms, seeking the steady heartbeat of safety. This woman, for all her designer armor and cutting edges, was not so different in this moment. Just tired, just in need of a place to rest. So instead of shifting away, Nathan adjusted slightly, just enough to give her better support. Outside, the window, clouds drifted by, painted in the molten gold and rose hues of a setting sun. His own eyes grew heavy as the rhythmic hum of the engines pulled him toward sleep. It was 90 minutes before she stirred. Her return to wakefulness was gradual, like a shoreline kissed by the tide. First, the awareness of warmth, then the scent, soap, cotton, and something intangible yet undeniably safe. And then, like a stone dropped in still water, reality rippled back in. Her eyes flew open. She straightened sharply, a jolt of mortification tightening her posture. Her cheek was warm where it had pressed into him, and dear God, there was even the faint evidence of drool marking his shirt. Color rushed into her cheeks, staining her dignity pink. This wasn't her. Evelyn Harrington did not lose composure. She didn't reveal weakness. She certainly didn't fall asleep like some hapless child on a stranger's shoulder. Words fumbled in her throat, scrambling to rebuild her polished facade. When Nathan glanced over with a smile so warm, it disarmed her completely. He raised a hand in a quiet, dismissive gesture before she could speak. "My shoulder's perfectly fine," he said, voice low and gentle, like a blanket laid over her embarrassment. "Actually, I should thank you. It's been a while since anyone's found me comfortable enough to sleep on. Please, don't worry about it." His kindness slid past her defenses, loosening something knotted deep in her chest, something she hadn't realized had been wound so tightly. She tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, straightened her jacket, and tried to resurrect her professional veneer, but it was useless. He had seen her unarmored, and strangely, it didn't feel like the disaster she'd imagined it would. "I'm usually not so unprofessional," she managed at last, though her voice came out smaller than she intended. Nathan's mouth curved faintly. "We're 30,000 feet in the air. I think the usual rules don't apply up here." His gaze drifted back to the small red toy airplane in his hands. His thumb rubbed a particular spot on the wing, the paint worn to a smoothness that spoke of countless repetitions. "That's an interesting good luck charm," she said, nodding toward it. His smile deepened, transforming his entire face, yours melting away under the warmth of memory. "It belongs to my son, Oliver. He insisted I take it, said it would help the real plane fly safer." 6-year-old logic is pretty bulletproof. The way he said his son's name like it was both precious and fragile stirred something dangerous. In her, dangerous because it was tender, and tenderness, she had learned, was a liability in her world. "You're traveling for business?" she asked, surprising herself with a genuine curiosity lacing her tone. "Job interview, software development," he said after a pause, as if measuring how much to reveal. "We just moved to the city, fresh start, and all that." Their conversation wandered after that, orbiting around their lives without ever diving into the deepest truths. She spoke of the conference in Chicago, crafting it into something more significant than it was. He described the job interview, trimming away the sharp edges of how desperately he needed the work. Beneath it all lingered a quiet loneliness neither dared name aloud. When his phone buzzed, she saw the change in him immediately, the way his features tightened, the crease etching deeper between his brows. "Everything okay?" she asked. He hesitated. "Oliver's fever is back up. Mrs. Chen says it's not too bad." But his voice faltered under the weight of unfinished worry. "She's our neighbor. She's watching him while I'm gone. She's wonderful. But she's not you," Evelyn finished softly, his eyes lifted to hers, surprise flickering there, as though she touched a truth he didn't think a stranger could understand. "Yeah, exactly." The moment stretched, unbroken and unhurried, the air between them charged with something unspoken. Then the plane shuddered violently, overhead lights flickered, passengers gasped. Evelyn's hand shot out instinctively, fingers gripping Nathan's arm. His palm covered hers instantly, steadying her with a quiet strength. "It's okay," he murmured, his voice calm even as his eyes betrayed the flicker of alertness. "Just air pockets. The plane's built for much worse." The turbulence faded, but she didn't release his arm. Neither did he move his hand from hers for a few suspended heartbeats. The connection between them had nothing to do with altitude or circumstance. "You're not scared?" she asked at last, her voice barely above the hum of the engines. The question came quietly, barely more than a breath swallowed by the hum of turbulence. "What are you afraid of?" Nathan hesitated. His thumb traced a slow, restless circle against her knuckles, as though trying to ground himself through the warmth of her skin, of not being there. He murmured, "When Oliver needs me." The words seemed to scrape their way out of him, heavy with a fear that lived too deep for him to hide. Another vibration from his phone. This time, whatever fragile color lingered in his face drained completely. His hand tightened around hers before he caught himself, drawing back like he'd overstepped. "What happened?" Evelyn asked, but she already knew. She could read the answer in the tightness around his eyes, the way his breath stalled in his chest. "Oliver's at the hospital," Nathan said, the words flat, measured like a dam holding back a flood. "Fever hit 104. Mrs. Chen called an ambulance." He typed a reply with hands that trembled despite his control. "How long until we land?" 2 hours. His voice cracked on the second word, equal parts prayer and curse. He looked like a man trapped in the cruelest waiting room imaginable, thousands of feet above the ground, powerless. Evelyn's chest tightened. Without hesitation, she took his hand again, properly this time, their fingers weaving together in a quiet defiance of the distance still between them. "Tell me about him," she said gently. "Tell me about Oliver." For a moment he just stared at her, uncertainty flickering in his gaze as though unsure if sharing would help or undo him completely. Then, like ice breaking under the weight of spring, his words poured out. He told her Oliver's first word had been airplane. Naturally, how his obsession with dinosaurs had given way to a fascination with space. The Superman cape he refused to take off, even for grocery store runs. The way he laughed, pure, unfiltered joy that made you feel lighter for having heard it. How he stuck his tongue out in fierce concentration when drawing. How he still couldn't pronounce the letter R, turning truck into twuck without shame. Evelyn listened, truly listened in a way she hadn't in years. Not like in the corporate boardrooms, where listening was a weapon, a strategy, defined leverage. This was different. This was stepping into someone's private universe. watching the way love itself bent the light there. It made her chest ache in a way that felt suspiciously like longing. "He sounds extraordinary," she said when Nathan's voice faltered. "He is," Nathan whispered. "He's everything good I've ever done wrapped into one stubborn, brilliant little person." His voice wavered, the truth too big for him to cage. "I can't lose him." "You won't," she said, the conviction in her tone surprising even herself. "Because he is you and you'd tear the sky itself apart before letting go." Nathan's hand tightened around hers. She returned the pressure. They stayed like that until the captain's voice broke the moment, announcing their descent into Chicago. The lights of the city glittered below them, scattered like a million diamonds spilled across black velvet. The moment the seatbelt sign went dark, Nathan was on his feet, yanking his bag from the overhead compartment with desperate precision. Evelyn rose too, her own luggage forgotten. "I'll help you get a cab," she said firmly, leaving no space for argument. "You don't have to. I want to. Call it repayment for the shoulder." They moved through the terminal like they've been doing this for years, her presence cutting paths through the crowd. His attention locked on his phone as Mrs. Chen relayed hospital details. His free hand clutched Oliver's toy plane like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to earth. By the time they reached the curb, Evelyn had conjured a black town car from nowhere. The driver was already loading Nathan's bag. "This is too much," Nathan said. "It's faster than waiting for a taxi." He paused with the car door open, looking back at her. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, she could see the exhaustion in every line of his face. But something else to gratitude so deep it almost looked like recognition. "Thank you, Evelyn." It was the first time he'd said her name. She couldn't remember telling him. "Go," she said, softer this time. "Oliver needs you." He slid into the car, and she watched it merge into the river of taillights until it was gone. Still, she stood there, her luggage at her feet, untethered from the life that usually owned her so completely. When her phone buzzed with conference emails, she ignored them. 3 hours later, she was in her hotel room, conference packet unopened. Nathan's number sat on her phone screen. He'd entered it mid-flight when they'd exchanged contact information, both assuming it would collect. Thus, finally, she typed, "How is Oliver?" The reply came almost instantly. "Fever broke. He's sleeping. Doctor says he'll be fine." She exhaled, not realizing until that moment she'd been holding her breath since he left. Before her better judgment could interfere, she typed, "Which hospital? Children's Memorial." Why? She didn't answer. She just called for another car. The hospital at night was a world of its own, bright, sterile light battling deep shadows. Footsteps muted in the hush of corridors. A nurse led her to room 312 with a knowing smile when Evelyn said she was a friend of the family. Inside, Nathan sat beside the bed, both hands wrapped around one much smaller. Oliver looked impossibly small, his blonde hair damp with sweat, his breathing now steady. Nathan's eyes lifted at the sound of her entrance, surprise and exhaustion vying for dominance on his face. "You came," he said simply. "I couldn't possibly focus on quarterly projections knowing you were here." She set down the bag she brought, a soft teddy bear from the gift shop, coffee from across the street, sandwiches because she doubted he'd eaten. Oliver stirred, blinking awake, and Evelyn saw Nathan's eyes in miniature staring back at her, warm brown, endlessly observant. "Are you Daddy's friend?" he asked, his voice still raspy. Evelyn stepped closer, drawn as though something in the room had hooked gently into her ribs. "I suppose I am," she said softly. Evelyn's voice was soft when she spoke, as though afraid to disturb the fragile peace in the hospital room. "Your dad told me all about you on the airplane," she said gently. Oliver, pale but alert, regarded her with a solemn wisdom far older than his 6 years. "He says you like dinosaurs." "Used to," Oliver corrected with quiet pride. "I like space now. Saturn has 62 moons." Even through the illness, the triumph in his voice was unmistakable. 62, Evelyn feigned astonishment. "That seems excessive. I can barely manage one life, and Saturn's out there juggling 62 moons." Oliver's giggle light and unguarded filled the sterile room like sunlight breaking through clouds. Nathan's shoulders dropped, the tension in him easing at the sound. They don't all have names. Oliver went on seriously. Some are just numbers. That's sad, right? Everyone should have a name. You're absolutely right, Evelyn agreed, perching on the edge of his bed as though drawn there by an unseen force. What would you name them? And with that, Oliver launched into an elaborate roll call of imaginary moons, each christened after his favorite foods, superheroes, and bits of magic only a child could conjure. Evelyn listened with uncharacteristic patience, her eyes alight. At some point she realized Nathan was watching her not guardedly, not with suspicion, but with an expression that was soft, almost reverent, as if he were witnessing something rare. Hours passed unnoticed. Oliver drifted in and out of sleep, always waking to find them both still there, one telling him stories about faraway places, the other supplying groan-worthy dad jokes that earned reluctant smiles. Nurses came and went, tending to charts and for drips, their faces softened by the sight of this unlikely trio. It was close to 3 in the morning when Oliver finally sank into the deep, unbroken sleep of recovery. The room had quieted to the hush of late night. Evelyn had shed her designer heels, her tailored jacket draped over a chair. Nathan had released his son's hand at last, trusting the steady rhythm of his breathing. "Why did you come?" Nathan asked, his voice low, not demanding, not suspicious, just seeking truth. Evelyn considered the easy out, a story about networking, about coincidence. But something about the antiseptic air mixed with the undercurrent of hope in this place made lies feel out of place. Because, she said at last, and for hours on a plane, you reminded me that love doesn't have to be a transaction, that care doesn't have to be a strategy. I've spent so long building walls to keep myself from feeling anything that might leave me exposed. But watching you with Oliver, I realized I've been protecting myself from the wrong things. Nathan was silent for a long time. Then he reached for her hand, tracing slow circles into her palm with his thumb. You know what Oliver said when I told him I was taking his toy plane on this trip. He said, maybe you'll meet someone nice, Daddy, someone who needs our plane to fly better. A bittersweet smile touched Evelyn's lips. 6-year-old wisdom, she murmured. The first blush of dawn crept in through the hospital windows, bathing the room in pale gold. Oliver stirred, rubbing his eyes. I'm hungry, he announced. A small but certain declaration of health. The nurses, charmed beyond measure, brought him to breakfast trays. Evelyn cut his pancakes while Nathan took a quick shower, returning in a crisp shirt pulled from his backpack. Evelyn's pretty, Oliver told his father with matter-of-fact certainty. Isn't she, Daddy? Nathan froze, cheeks coloring, and Evelyn felt her own face warm. Yes, buddy, she is, Nathan said at last, meeting her eyes in a way that made the air between them shift. Are you going to marry her? Oliver pressed, without a hint of hesitation. Oh, Nathan's mortification was complete. But Evelyn's laughter rang out, genuine and unrestrained, filling the room like music. How about we start with being friends, she told Oliver, and see where the plane takes us. He considered this gravely before nodding. Okay, but if you get married, can I be the ring bearer? Nathan corrected automatically. I like bear better, Oliver said firmly. Ring bearer it is, Evelyn said, winking. Nathan's interview later that day went smoothly, though he could barely recall the details. Afterward, his mind kept straying to that hospital room where a CEO was teaching his son card games. He got the job, but the only thing he remembered clearly was asking the hiring manager about sick leave for parents. When he returned, Evelyn was seated beside Oliver with a laptop open, pausing every few minutes to suggest names for moons that made the boy beam. How'd it go? She asked. I got it. Starting to weeks. That's wonderful, she said, and the smile that lit her face reached all the way to her eyes. Evelyn's making an app, Oliver announced proudly, about Saturn's moons. So they can all have names. They fell into a rhythm over. The next day, she arrived each morning with real coffee and fresh fruit. Nathan told her she didn't need to come, and she ignored him every time. Oliver demanded stories from them both, weaving their tales together into a universe of shared imagination. On the second night Oliver's last before being discharged, they sat side by side in a dimly lit room. He slept soundly, his cheeks warm with returning health. "This isn't how I pictured this trip going," Evelyn admitted softly. "Me neither. I thought the hardest part would be interviewing hers. Nathan," she hesitated, as though standing at the edge of something steep. "I don't know how to do this. Do what? Care. Connect. Be vulnerable. I'm good at running a company, at making strategic decisions, closing deals, giving presentations. But this," she gestured between them, "this terrifies me." Nathan turned to face her fully, the weight of his gaze steady. "You showed up at a hospital for people you've known for hours. You've spent 2 days making my son laugh. You're doing fine." His voice was quiet but certain, and in that moment, Evelyn began to believe him. "When you return to your life and I return to mine, we'll figure it out. Or we won't." "But, Evelyn," Nathan's voice softened as he reached for her hand, the warmth of his touch lingering between them. "Meeting you, having you here, it's reminded me that Oliver and I don't have to be our own lonely island. Maybe, just maybe, there's room for someone else in our little world." Her lips curved faintly, though her eyes betrayed the storm beneath. "I live in Los Angeles. You just moved to Chicago." Nathan's smile was small, almost shy. "They've invented these things called airplanes. I hear you're quite familiar with them." The next morning, the sterile hum of the hospital seemed softer, less oppressive. Oliver, pale but grinning, insisted Evelyn help him tuck his toy airplane into his bag with careful reverence. "It brought you to us," he said gravely. "It's magic now." In the lobby, they hovered in that strange space between farewell and something unfinished. Nathan clutched discharge papers. Evelyn's unused conference badge was still buried in her pocket. "So," Nathan began. "So," Evelyn echoed. "Can we video call you?" Oliver burst in, unable to contain himself. "I want to show you my room when we paint it." Evelyn's throat tightened, but she managed a warm smile. "I love that." Nathan took out his phone, his tone deliberate. "How about we start with dinner, when you're back in L.A. and we're settled? Here, dinner's good," she said softly. "Dinner's normal. Nothing about this has been normal." He pointed out. "No," she admitted. "It's been better." The weeks that followed blurred into a warm, unexpected rhythm. Video calls that stretched to long, messages exchanged in stolen moments between meetings. Photos of Oliver on his first day at his new school. Nathan's updates came with an intimacy that crept past her defense's notes about the job he'd begun. The slow transformation of their apartment, the small, human victories of their days. 3 weeks later, Evelyn boarded a flight to Chicago. Officially, it was for business. In truth, she was following a pulse she couldn't name. Oliver dragged her through the Museum of Science and Industry, explaining every exhibit with exhausting enthusiasm. Nathan walked beside her through Millennium Park, his fingers finding hers as Oliver darted ahead, making silly faces at his reflection in the beam. Months passed, and her life bent in ways she hadn't thought possible. She restructured her company for remote work, splitting her time between coasts. Nathan and Oliver visited Los Angeles, where Oliver pronounced the ocean too big, but the ice cream just right. 1 year after that first flight, Evelyn stood in the Chicago ballroom, hosting her company's first Midwest gala. Officially, she'd moved the headquarters for tax benefits, but anyone who knew her saw the truth. She was mid-speech when she saw them: Nathan, devastatingly handsome in a tuxedo, and Oliver in a tiny suit with a crooked clip-on bow tie, clutching something. Behind his back, she faltered, the crowd murmuring in confusion, but she didn't hear them. Oliver reached her first, beaming as he revealed a painted canvas, 3 figures under a star-speckled sky. An airplane soared above them. Saturn glowed in the corner. "I made it for you," he announced, his voice carrying through the microphone she hadn't realized she still held low enough for him to speak into. "That's us. We're a family now, right?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Evelyn knelt. "Designer, gown pulling on the floor, and pulled him close. Yes, sweetheart, we're a family. Nathan stepped onto the stage, his hand settling on her shoulder, grounding her. He took the microphone, his voice steady. Sorry for the interruption, everyone. But when you know something's right, you don't wait for the perfect moment. You make it. He turned to her, producing a small velvet box. That flight a year ago was supposed to be for hours. But Evelyn, I want to keep flying with you. Through turbulence and clear skies, through everything life throws at us. Will you marry us, Oliver, and me? Oliver bounced in place. Say yes. Say yes. I already told everyone at school you would. Laughter rippled through the crowd, but quickly, stilled. All eyes turned to her. Tears blurred her vision. She didn't care about the mascara streaking down her cheeks, or the hundreds of Chicago's elite watching. Nothing about my life has gone according to plan since I met you two, she said, her voice thick with emotion, and thank God for that. Yes, yes, of course, yes. Nathan slid the ring onto her finger as Oliver threw his arms around them both. Applause erupted, but to the three of them, the world had gone quiet. They were a family forged 30,000 feet above the earth. Bound by a love that defied reason yet felt inevitable, they slipped away from the gala early, the Chicago night wrapping around them like a promise. City lights glittered above the dark lake, and Oliver walked between them, swinging their hands. Hey, Evelyn? He piped up as they neared Nathan's car. Yes, sweetheart, now that you're gonna be my mom, can we get a dog? Nathan groaned. Oliver, we talked about this, actually, Evelyn interrupted, grinning. I think a dog sounds perfect. Every family needs a dog. 6 months later, they were married by Lake Michigan in a small ceremony where Oliver, true to his word, was the ring bearer. Complete with tiny bear ears Evelyn had custom made. Mrs. Chen wept the entire time. The company board sent their congratulations, laced with polite concern in his vows. Nathan's voice trembled only once. You taught me that love isn't about finding someone to complete you. It's about finding someone who makes you want to keep building together. And as they stood with Oliver between them, the lake wind at their backs, Evelyn knew every mile, every leap of faith, every unplanned detour had brought her exactly where she was meant to be. Nathan's voice was steady, but his eyes shimmered when he spoke his vows. Love isn't about finding someone who completes you, he said, glancing at Evelyn with the kind of quiet conviction that comes from surviving loss. It's about finding someone who inspires you to complete yourself. You didn't just appear in our lives. Evelyn, you flew into them. And when you did, you gave us wings. Evelyn's voice trembled when it was her turn. I spent years building a life that looked flawless to the outside world, she began, the room falling into a hush, perfect on paper, polished in every photograph. But you and Oliver taught me that real perfection isn't spotless. It's messy bedtime stories told in voices gone hoarse. It's pancakes burned at the edges on Sunday mornings. It's a little boy's toy airplane that carries more magic than the biggest deal I've ever signed. You didn't just give me love, you gave me a home. When Oliver insisted on speaking, there were chuckles in the crowd, but the boy stood proud, his small voice carrying farther than anyone expected. Evelyn makes Daddy laugh. She helps me with homework. She doesn't get mad when I spill juice. That's love, right? And just like that, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Life after the wedding wasn't the fairy tale people imagined. Oliver's health faltered again, pulling them back into the sterile walls of a hospital. But this time, they went together, one family, unshakable. Evelyn's company faced storms that demanded long nights and brutal decisions. Nathan wrestled to balance his new job with fatherhood and partnership. They argued over money, over parenting choices, over whose turn it was to walk Saturn, the spirited dog Oliver had named after the planet. And yet, they also had slow Sunday mornings, tangled in blankets with cartoons playing softly in the background. They had family trips that always began with an airplane ride, Oliver clutching his little model for luck. They had nights spent on the couch with wine in hand, their conversation flowing easily or sometimes not at all because the silence was comfortable. The kind that only exists between people who found their match. 3 years after that first chance meeting at 30,000 feet, Evelyn found Nathan in Oliver's room. Their son now was all limbs and limitless dreams. Asleep with that same battered toy airplane resting on his nightstand. She slipped her arms around Nathan from behind. "What are you thinking?" she whispered. "That a delayed flight changed everything," he murmured. "If I'd taken the earlier one, if you'd flown the next day. But we didn't," Evelyn said softly. "We were exactly where we were meant to be." Nathan turned, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Oliver asked me today if we could have a little sister." Her hand rested against her still flat stomach, their shared secret resting quietly beneath her palm. "And what did you tell him?" "That we'd have to ask you." "Well," she smiled, "tell him his wish will come true in about 7 months." The joy on Nathan's face bloomed like sunrise. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her with care so they wouldn't wake Oliver. "Another adventure," he whispered. "The best kind," she replied. They lingered there in the doorway, watching. Their son breathed deeply in his dreams, that tiny airplane still clutched in his hand. It had traveled with them on a flight meant to last just for hours, but it had carried them into a lifetime. Outside, high above the city, a plane's lights blinked in the darkness. Evelyn remembered waking up on Nathan's shoulder, the embarrassed laugh that led to conversation. The conversation that became connection, and the connection that built this beautiful, imperfect family she hadn't known she needed, but now couldn't imagine living without. As they finally turned toward their bedroom, Oliver stirred, mumbling through sleep, "Love you, Mom, love you, Dad." They both froze in place, smiling through the warmth in their chests. "Love you too, buddy." Nathan whispered, "Sweet dreams, my darling," Evelyn added. In a home filled with toy airplanes and real love with memories of hospital rooms, that gave way to joy, and of flights that led not to destinations, but to each other. They slept in peace. The morning would bring chaos. Oliver, thrilled at the idea of becoming a big brother, would chatter endlessly over breakfast. Work calls would buzz before coffee had even been poured. Saturn would almost certainly chew on something expensive, but it would also bring laughter, the easy comfort of hugs, and the unshakable knowledge that they were exactly where they were meant to be together. All because one exhausted CEO had fallen asleep on a single father's shoulder. 30,000 feet in the air, on a flight that was supposed to last for hours and ended up lasting forever.